Generosity, the source of true blessings. Imagine this. You stand in front of a quiet altar, hands clasped, eyes closed, whispering a prayer for good fortune. Maybe you ask for health, maybe for wealth, maybe for peace in your family. And somewhere deep inside, you wonder, will my wishes truly be answered? Now, let me ask you something that might feel a little unsettling at first. Do blessings come from prayer, or from what we give away? It's a question worth pausing on. Because in today's world, many of us spend so much energy searching for luck, chasing after rituals, or waiting for the universe to hand us a gift. We light candles, we make wishes, we hope that life will somehow reward us. But have you ever noticed, true blessings rarely arrive in the way we imagine? The Buddha once said, if you wish for happiness, learn first to give happiness. In other words, blessings don't come to us because we demand them, or because we desperately wish for them. They come from the seeds we plant in the lives of others. And the very first seed, the most powerful one, is generosity. Think about it for a moment. When was the last time you gave something, not because you were forced, not because you were looking for recognition, but simply because you wanted someone else to be happy? Maybe it was something small, giving your seat to a stranger on the bus, sharing a meal with a friend, or offering a listening ear to someone who was going through a hard time. In those moments, did you notice how your heart felt? Light, expansive, almost as if the very act of giving opened a door inside you. That is not an accident. That is the natural law of life. True blessings flow from generosity. And yet, here's the paradox. Most people are still looking for blessings in the wrong place. We think if we pray harder, work harder, or wait longer, life will finally turn around. But blessings don't fall from the sky. They rise from the ground we water with our own kindness. Let me share a story. There was once a poor farmer who had only one bowl of rice left for his family. That night, a stranger knocked on his door, hungry and exhausted. The farmer hesitated. Giving away that bowl meant his family would go hungry. But something inside him said, this man's hunger is greater than mine. And so, he offered the rice. The next morning, when he returned to his field, he found it filled with golden stalks of grain, more than he had ever seen in his life. Now, whether this story is literal or symbolic doesn't really matter. The point is clear. When we give from the heart, we awaken an energy that multiplies far beyond what we could imagine. So here's the real question for you. What is the source of your blessings? Do they come from wishing? Or do they come from giving? In Buddhism, generosity, DNA, is called the first perfection, the very foundation of all spiritual growth. It's not just about money or material things. It's about time, about care, about presence. Sometimes, the most generous act you can offer is simply to sit with someone in silence, to let them know they're not alone. But here's something we don't always realize. Generosity transforms the giver more than the receiver. When you give, you're not just helping someone else. You're breaking the chains of your own fear, your own attachment, your own scarcity mindset. Every act of giving whispers to your soul, I have enough. I am enough. And isn't that what true blessings feel like? Not the piling up of things, but the deep knowing that you already hold abundance inside you. So today, as we begin this journey together, I invite you to sit with this thought. What if the blessings you seek are already in your hands, waiting to be shared? Because maybe, just maybe, the real secret is this. Blessings don't come to those who only pray for them. They come to those who dare to give them away. This is only the beginning. In the next part, we'll go deeper into why generosity is considered the root of fortune in Buddhist wisdom, and how even the smallest act of giving can ripple out to transform not just one life, but the world around us. So stay with me, because what you'll discover might just change the way you see luck, fortune, and blessings forever. The guiding story. True blessings are measured by the heart, not by the size of the gift. Let me tell you a story from the time of the Buddha. Once, in a small village, there lived a man who was known to be very poor. His clothes were torn, his hut was fragile, and every day was a struggle just to have enough food to survive. While others in the village sometimes offered gifts of gold, fine cloth, or delicious meals to the Buddha and his disciples, this man felt he had nothing worthy to give. One day, news spread that the Buddha would be passing through his village. The people prepared offerings, fruits, rice, flowers, and fragrant incense. The poor man wanted so badly to be part of this moment, to offer something to the Buddha. But when he looked around his home, all he could find was a small handful of dry rice, his only meal for the day. He hesitated. What difference can this tiny handful make? Compared to the baskets of food others will give, mine is nothing. And yet, deep inside, a voice whispered, "Give with your heart." It is not the size of the gift, but the sincerity behind it that matters. So he walked to where the Buddha was, holding that little handful of rice. When his turn came, he knelt down, hands trembling, and placed the dry rice in the Buddha's alms bowl. To everyone's surprise, the Buddha smiled warmly and blessed him. The disciples who stood nearby noticed something unusual. When the rice touched the bowl, it shimmered with a light, as though it had turned into golden grains. Later, the Buddha explained, "This man's gift, though small, was given with the deepest sincerity. He offered not from abundance, but from his very heart. Such giving carries immeasurable merit." Now, pause with me here. Isn't that beautiful? This story isn't about rice. It's about the truth we often forget. Blessings are not measured by how much we give, but by how we give. You see, generosity has little to do with numbers, or wealth, or display. It has everything to do with the heart. One person may give $1,000 but secretly hope for recognition, praise, or something in return. Another may give a single dollar, but with genuine compassion, with a true wish for another's happiness. And according to Buddhist wisdom, it is the latter who holds the greater blessing. Think about your own life. Have you ever received a gift that wasn't expensive, but it meant the world to you? Maybe it was a handwritten note, or someone cooking you a simple meal when you were going through a hard time. Maybe it was just a hug that arrived exactly when you needed it most. Those moments stick with us, not because of the price tag, but because of the love that carried them. That is the essence of true giving. But here's something even deeper. When we look at the story of the poor man and his handful of rice, we also see a profound teaching about courage. Imagine being in his place, surrounded by wealthy villagers making grand offerings, while all you have is a few grains of rice. It would have been so easy to hide, to feel ashamed, to tell himself, "I have nothing worth giving, so I will give nothing." And yet, he gave anyway. He gave despite the fear of looking small. He gave despite the possibility of being judged. That act itself was an expression of inner freedom. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is to give when it feels like we don't have enough. Because in that moment, we declare to life, "I may not have much, but I still have the capacity to love." And that declaration opens the door to blessings greater than anything money could buy. Here's a modern example. A friend once told me about a time when she was struggling financially. She barely had enough to cover her rent, and she was constantly worried about bills. One evening, she was walking home and passed a man sitting on the sidewalk, shivering in the cold. She only had a few dollars left in her wallet, but without thinking twice, she gave them to him. Later, she told me, it wasn't the money that mattered. It was that I realized I still had something to give. And that feeling, that I wasn't empty, that I wasn't powerless, gave me more strength than keeping those few dollars ever could. Isn't that the same spirit as the poor man with the rice? Sometimes the act of giving doesn't change the world outside immediately, but it changes the world inside us, and that is where blessings truly begin. Let's ask ourselves an honest question. When we give, do we give from abundance or from the heart? We live in a culture that often measures generosity in numbers. How much money you donate, how big the gift is, how visible the gesture appears. But Buddhism gently reminds us, a gift without sincerity is just a transaction. Only when the heart is present does giving become a doorway to blessings. The poor man's story isn't meant to shame those who can give more. It's not about saying small gifts are always better. It's about reminding us that the size of the gift never matters as much as the size of the heart behind it. So here's the paradox. You don't need wealth to create blessings. You don't need abundance to give meaningfully. What you need is presence, compassion, and sincerity. And maybe this is where many of us get stuck. We think, I'll give when I have more. I'll help others when my life is stable. I'll share when I'm secure. But the story of the poor man tells us something radical. Blessings don't wait until we have enough. They begin the moment we choose to give, even from the little we hold in our hands. Because the act of giving itself is what creates the sense of abundance. It's not that we give because we are blessed. It's that we are blessed because we give. Let me leave you with this reflection. If you had only a handful of rice today, something small, maybe even insignificant in the eyes of the world, would you still find the courage to give it? Would you believe that your little act of generosity could hold immeasurable value? The Buddhist story reminds us that every time we give with sincerity, no matter how little, we are planting seeds of blessing not just for others, but for ourselves. So perhaps the next time you wonder whether your contribution is enough, remember the poor man with his handful of dry rice. Remember that blessings are not born from the size of your gift, but from the size of your heart. And that heart, the one that chooses love, that chooses generosity, is the true source of fortune. White right pointing backhand index in the next part will explore why generosity transforms not only the lives of others but also reshapes our own inner world, breaking fear, attachment, and scarcity, leading us to discover that we already carry abundance within. What is generosity? Theme: generosity is not just giving money, it is the opening of the heart. When we hear the word generosity, what's the first image that comes to mind? For many people, it's money, writing a check, making a donation, giving something material. And yes, that's one form of generosity, but it's only the surface. In Buddhist wisdom, generosity, what we call DNA, is much broader, much deeper. It is not limited to wealth. It is about the willingness to share whatever we have, in whatever form, with sincerity and kindness. That means generosity can be as simple as a smile offered to a stranger, a few kind words to someone who feels invisible, or a moment of your time given to listen when a friend is struggling. Have you ever experienced that? Maybe you were going through a hard day, carrying stress like a heavy backpack, and then someone looked at you, really looked at you, and smiled. For a brief moment, that smile lifted the weight. That is generosity. Or think about the times when you've been lost, confused, uncertain about a decision, and someone offered you gentle advice, or just a listening ear. That gift didn't cost money. But didn't it feel priceless? So let's broaden our understanding here. Generosity is not just what we give out of our wallet. It's what we give out of our heart. It could be patience when someone tests our limits. It could be forgiveness when we feel wronged. It could be encouragement when someone has forgotten their own strength. And sometimes it could be as simple as presence. Just being there with someone, without distraction, without rushing, without judgment. In today's world, where everyone is so busy, offering your full attention is one of the rarest and most generous gifts you can give. Here's the beauty of it. Generosity is available to everyone. You don't need to be wealthy to practice it. You don't need to have perfect circumstances. You don't need to wait for someday when you have more to give. Because right now, in this very moment, you already have something to share. Ask yourself, what do I carry that I can offer? Maybe it's kindness. Maybe it's wisdom gained from your own struggles. Maybe it's time, love, or even just the simple willingness to listen. And if you're thinking, but I don't have much to give, remember the story we shared earlier about the man with the handful of rice. He gave from his heart, and that was enough to create great blessings. Generosity, at its core, is about expanding the heart. You see, when we hold tightly to what we have, whether it's money, time, or even emotions, we shrink. Life feels smaller, more confined. But the moment we share, even something little, our heart opens. It stretches. It learns that abundance is not about how much we keep, but about how much we let flow. Let me put it this way. Imagine a closed fist. It holds tightly, but it cannot receive anything new. Now imagine an open hand. It may let go, but it is also ready to receive. That's what generosity does. It turns the closed fist of fear into the open hand of trust. I remember a personal experience. There was a time when I felt drained, almost empty inside. Work was heavy. Life felt overwhelming. One evening, while waiting in line at a grocery store, the cashier looked exhausted. Normally, I would have just paid and left, but something nudged me to say, "Hey, thank you for working so hard tonight. I hope you get some rest soon." It wasn't much, just a few words, but her face lit up, and for the first time that day, so did mine. That's when I realized generosity doesn't always require more energy, it creates more energy. When we give, we don't actually lose. We gain. Here's something fascinating. Modern psychology even supports this ancient truth. Studies show that people who practice small acts of kindness, holding a door, offering help, even just giving compliments, report higher levels of happiness and lower levels of stress. Why? Because giving shifts the focus from ourselves to the wider world. It connects us. It reminds us that we are part of something larger than just our own worries. And connection, as human beings, is what we crave most deeply. Now, let's reflect together. If generosity isn't about money alone, but about the heart, then what is one way you can practice it today? Could you call someone you've been meaning to reach out to? Could you forgive a small hurt instead of carrying it? Could you simply smile at a stranger without expecting anything back? Remember, generosity doesn't need to be grand. It just needs to be real. And here's a paradox worth thinking about. The more we give, the more we realize we already have. Have you ever noticed this? You give someone encouragement, and suddenly you feel more encouraged yourself. You give someone time, and somehow your day feels richer, not poorer. You give someone kindness, and your own heart feels lighter. It's almost as if generosity isn't just about helping others, it's about healing ourselves. The Buddha once taught that generosity is the very first step on the spiritual path, because it softens the heart. A hard, closed heart cannot experience true peace, but an open, generous heart can taste freedom. So maybe generosity isn't just about giving to others. Maybe it's also about setting ourselves free from fear, from scarcity, from the illusion that we don't have enough. So let me ask you, what does generosity look like in your life? It could be money, yes. But maybe, more importantly, it could be the way you show up in small, ordinary moments. Because in the end, generosity is simply this: the decision to make your heart bigger than your fear. And every time you choose to open, you create blessings, not just for others, but for yourself as well. White right pointing backhand index in the next part, we'll explore how generosity transforms both the giver and the receiver, creating ripples of blessings that extend far beyond what we can see. Generosity and karma. Theme: every act of giving plants a seed, and blessings ripen when the time is right. Think for a moment about the last time you planted something: a flower, a tree, maybe even a small herb in a pot by the window. You put the seed in the soil, you covered it, you gave it water, and then you waited. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The soil looked the same, the pot looked the same. You might have even wondered, did the seed survive? Did my effort make any difference? But then, slowly, quietly, life began to move. One day, a tiny green sprout pushed its way through the soil. Weeks later, leaves unfolded. And in time, that seed became something far greater than it once was: a flower, a fruit, a tree. That is the law of nature. And that is also the law of karma. In Buddhism, every act of generosity is like planting a seed. When you give with sincerity, whether it's money, time, kindness, or even just a smile, you place a seed of goodness into the field of life. You may not see results immediately. In fact, sometimes it feels like nothing changes. But here's the truth: no act of genuine giving is ever wasted. Just as seeds rest in the soil until the right rain and sunlight come, the blessings of generosity ripen when the right conditions arrive. Now, let me share a story. A wealthy merchant once mocked a poor woman who offered only a small lamp at the temple. While others donated grand lanterns and golden oil, she placed her little lamp with shaky hands. The merchant laughed. What difference can such a tiny light make? But that night, when the winds blew across the temple courtyard, the grand lamp sputtered and went out. Only one lamp continued to shine, the little one she had offered. The Buddha explained, "Her lamp burns with sincerity, not with pride. That is why its light endures." The merchant gave more, but his giving was clouded by arrogance. The woman gave less, but with a pure heart. And the law of karma ensured that her light, her blessing, would continue to shine. This is why Buddhist teachings remind us, generosity is not a transaction. It is an investment in the unseen garden of life. When we give, we don't always see immediate results, but the seed is planted. And when the time is right, sometimes days later, sometimes years later, sometimes even in another chapter of our life, that seed blossoms into blessings. Let's bring this closer to our daily lives. Think about a time when someone helped you long ago, in a way that seemed small at the time, but years later, you realized it changed your life. Maybe a teacher who encouraged you when you doubted yourself. Maybe a stranger who offered kindness at a moment when you felt lost. Those were seeds planted in you. And as your life unfolded, they bore fruit. Now consider, how many seeds are you planting in others today, without even realizing it? A word of encouragement today might blossom into someone's courage tomorrow. A gesture of kindness today might become someone's strength years later. The karma of giving is not bound by time. It flows, it grows, it finds its moment to bloom. But let's also be honest. Sometimes we give, and we expect something in return. We think, I helped them, so why don't I see results? This is like planting a seed and then digging it up every day to see if it has grown. The soil needs time. The seed needs trust. The Buddha often emphasized, give without attachment to the outcome, because the fruit will ripen, but not on your schedule. Karma has its own rhythm, its own season. Here's an image that helps me. Imagine blessings as fruit trees in an orchard. Some trees bear fruit quickly, like a banana tree, offering sweet nourishment within a year. Some take longer, like a mango tree, which may take many years before it ripens. And some, like a great oak, grow for decades before offering shade. But whether fast or slow, each tree begins with the same thing, a seed. And that seed is generosity. So the question isn't when the fruit will appear. The question is, are you planting the seeds at all? There's also a deeper lesson here about trust. In our modern world, we are conditioned to look for instant results. Click a button, get a delivery. Post a picture, get a like. Swipe a screen, find a match. But generosity doesn't follow that timeline. Its blessings ripen in their own time, often in ways we can't predict. Maybe you help a stranger today, and 10 years from now someone else helps your child. Maybe you comfort a friend now, and years later comfort returns to you when you least expect it. The threads of karma are vast and invisible, but they are never random. I remember once, years ago, I gave a small kindness to a colleague, a ride home after work when it was raining. I didn't think much of it. Years later, when I was going through a hard time, that same colleague reached out, offering support I didn't even know I needed. That's when I understood, generosity is never lost. It circles back, like rain returning to the ocean. Let me pause and ask you, what seeds are you planting today? Are they seeds of kindness, patience, compassion? Or seeds of anger, resentment, indifference? Because whatever we plant, in time, will bear fruit. Generosity is one of the most powerful seeds we can plant, not only because it helps others, but because it ensures that our own orchard of blessings will grow. And here's a paradox. Even though blessings may not appear right away, the act of giving already creates an immediate fruit inside, the fruit of joy. Think about it. When you give sincerely, doesn't your heart feel lighter? Doesn't a sense of warmth arise, even before anything comes back to you? That inner joy is the first fruit of generosity. The external blessings may take time, but the inner blessing blooms instantly. So perhaps we can reframe how we see karma. It is not punishment or reward handed down from outside. It is simply the unfolding of seeds we ourselves have planted. If you want sweetness in your life, plant seeds of sweetness. If you want peace, plant seeds of peace. If you want blessings, plant seeds of generosity. And trust that the fruits will come. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but when the soil of life is ready, the tree will blossom. So let me ask you one final question for this part. If every act of giving plants a seed, what kind of garden do you want to grow in your life? Because one day, you will sit in the shade of the trees you are planting right now. And in that moment, you'll realize blessings were never far away. They were growing quietly all along. White right pointing backhand index in the next part will explore how generosity doesn't just change our future blessings, but also transforms our present moment, shifting our mindset from scarcity to abundance, from fear to freedom. The three forms of generosity. There's a saying in Buddhism, generosity wears many faces. When most of us hear the word giving, we think about money or possessions. We think about writing a check, donating clothes, offering food. And yes, that is generosity, but it's only one layer. The truth is, there are three forms of giving, three ways of planting seeds of blessing in this life. They are called Tai Thai, material giving, Phap Thai, sharing wisdom, and Vo Ui Thai, giving fearlessness. Each one is like a different kind of nourishment. One feeds the body, one feeds the mind, and one feeds the heart. Together, they create a complete circle of compassion. Let's walk through them, one by one. 1. Tai Thai, material giving. This is the most familiar. It's when we give what we have, money, food, clothing, shelter. It's offering the tangible things that can ease someone's suffering in the present moment. Think of the person who buys a meal for someone on the street, or the family that donates to help build a school, or even something simple, sharing your umbrella on a rainy day. Material giving reminds us that generosity isn't about how much we have, it's about how much we are willing to share. There's a Buddhist story about a king who gave away half his kingdom in a grand act of charity. People praised him endlessly. But in another village, a poor farmer gave only a small piece of bread, the last one he had, for someone hungrier than him. The Buddha said, both acts were equal in merit. Why? Because what matters isn't the size of the gift, but the size of the heart. And maybe this invites us to reflect, how often do we hold back from giving because we think, what I have is too little, it won't make a difference. But if everyone gave their too little, the world would overflow. 2. Phap Thai, sharing wisdom. The second form of generosity goes deeper. It's not about possessions, but about knowledge. Have you ever had someone share a lesson with you that changed the way you see life? Maybe it was advice from a parent, or a teacher's encouragement, or a friend's insight that helped you through a hard time. That is Phap Thai, the gift of truth, of understanding, of guiding someone toward clarity. In Buddhism, the highest form of giving is considered Phap Thai, because while food may ease hunger for a day, wisdom can transform a person's entire life. A loaf of bread feeds the stomach. A piece of wisdom feeds the soul. And here's the thing, you don't need to be a monk, a scholar, or a philosopher to share wisdom. You simply need to share what you've learned from your own journey. Maybe you've learned patience through hardship. Maybe you've discovered the value of forgiveness. Maybe you've simply realized that slowing down makes life more beautiful. Sharing those truths is a gift. Ask yourself, what lessons has life taught you that someone else might need to hear? What pain have you walked through that could become someone else's lantern? When we pass on wisdom, we are lighting lamps. And the beauty is, one lamp can light 1,000 others without losing its flame. 3. Vo Ui Thai, giving fearlessness. This is the most subtle, and perhaps the most powerful. Vo Ui means without fear. It is the gift of safety, of protection, of reassurance. Think about what it feels like to be afraid, lost in uncertainty, drowning in anxiety, or trapped in danger. In those moments, what we crave most is not money or advice, but someone who can make us feel safe. When you comfort a friend who's grieving, you are giving fearlessness. When you stand up for someone being bullied, you are giving fearlessness. When you hold the hand of a loved one in the hospital, you are giving fearlessness. This kind of generosity doesn't require wealth or knowledge. It only requires presence. It requires the courage to show up and say, you are not alone. I am here with you. And sometimes, that is the greatest gift of all. The 3 together. So when we look at these 3, material giving, sharing wisdom, and giving fearlessness, we see that generosity is not just one thing. It is a spectrum, a living practice. Imagine them as 3 candles, one for the body, one for the mind, one for the heart. Alone, each one shines. But together, they create a light bright enough to guide a whole village. Each form of generosity nurtures blessings in a different way. Material giving creates the conditions for survival. Sharing wisdom creates the conditions for growth. Giving fearlessness creates the conditions for peace. A modern reflection. In our modern world, these 3 forms of generosity are needed more than ever. We see people struggling to meet basic needs. That calls for Thai Thai. We see people overwhelmed by confusion, drowning in misinformation. That calls for Phap Thai. We see people anxious, isolated, scared. That calls for Vo Ui Thai. And the truth is, each of us has the ability to give all 3. Maybe you don't have much money, but you can share your experiences, your knowledge, your encouragement. That is Phap Thai. Maybe you don't have profound wisdom to teach, but you can simply sit beside someone in silence when they are afraid. That is Vo Ui Thai. Maybe you don't always know the right words, but you can give a meal, a jacket, a ride. That is Thai Thai. My own reflection. I remember once, I visited a hospice where volunteers spent time with people in their final days. Some of the volunteers brought food. That was material giving. Some read books or recited prayers. That was wisdom giving. But what struck me most were the volunteers who simply sat, held hands, and listened. They weren't doing anything grand, but you could see the patients' faces soften, their fear ease. That was giving fearlessness. It reminded me that generosity isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as being the calm presence someone else can lean on. A question for you. So I want to leave you with this question. Which form of generosity are you practicing most in your life? And which one could you begin practicing more? Because the beauty of this teaching is that you don't need wealth, or power, or special status to be generous. You only need a heart willing to open. And when you do, blessings ripple out, not just into the lives of others, but back into your own. Closing thought. Generosity is like water. It flows in many forms, sometimes as a river that nourishes crops, sometimes as rain that cools the earth, sometimes as a drop that eases thirst. Whether material, wisdom, or fearlessness, each act of giving keeps life alive. So perhaps the invitation is simple: keep the water flowing. Because somewhere, someone is thirsty for food, for truth, for peace. And maybe, just maybe, you are the well they've been waiting for. Generosity and a pure heart. There's something we rarely talk about when it comes to generosity. Most people think giving is about the receiver. We think it's about helping them, supporting them, lifting them up. And yes, that's true. But there's another side to the story, one that often gets overlooked. Generosity also transforms the giver. But here's the catch: it depends on how you give. Because not all giving comes from the same place. Some giving is heavy, some giving is calculated, some giving carries pride. And then, there is a kind of giving that is pure, light, and free. Giving with strings attached. Have you ever noticed that sometimes people give with hidden expectations? Maybe it's a donation with the hope of recognition. Maybe it's a favor offered so they can call it back later. Maybe it's charity done loudly, with cameras rolling, so the world can see. On the surface, it looks like generosity. But deep down, it's more about ego than compassion. The Buddha once said, "If you give with pride, you will receive pride. If you give with purity, you will receive purity." When giving is tied to ego, it becomes a transaction. It's no longer a gift, it's a form of buying. Buying approval, buying reputation, buying blessings. And here's the thing, when we give like that, our heart doesn't feel lighter. Sometimes, it even feels heavier. The power of pure giving. Now think about a different kind of giving. Imagine you see someone struggling, and you help them quietly, without anyone knowing. You don't expect gratitude. You don't expect a return. You simply feel joy in the act itself. That kind of giving is pure. That kind of giving cleanses the heart. Have you ever felt that? That warm, quiet glow after helping someone. Not because you had to, not because anyone asked, but because it felt right? That's the secret most people miss. True generosity doesn't just bless the other, it liberates us. The inner gift. When we give with a pure heart, we're not just handing something over, we are releasing something inside ourselves. We are releasing attachment. We are releasing fear of lack. We are releasing the ego's grip that says, "This is mine." And in that release, something beautiful happens. The heart expands. It breathes. It becomes light. It's almost like unclenching a fist. When you hold tight, your hand is tense. When you open it, there's relief. Pure generosity is that opening. Modern example, the quiet donor. I remember hearing about a man who donated millions to build hospitals, but he did it anonymously. His name was never on the wall, never in the news. People only discovered it after he passed away. Why did he do that? Because for him, the joy wasn't in being praised, it was in knowing he had helped. That's what pure giving looks like. Silent, simple, joyful. And here's the paradox. When you give this way, you actually receive more than you give. You receive peace. You receive joy. You receive the kind of happiness that no amount of wealth can buy. The science of joyful giving. Even modern science backs this up. Studies show that when people give, especially when they give selflessly, their brains release endorphins, dopamine, and oxytocin. Scientists call it the helper's high. In other words, giving literally heals us. It reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, even lengthens lifespan. But notice, it's not just any giving. It's not giving done reluctantly, or with pride, or for show. The body knows the difference. The heart knows the difference. The blessing only comes when the giving is sincere. A spiritual mirror. Here's another way to see it. Generosity is like a mirror. It shows us our true relationship with the world. If we give and feel resentful, the mirror shows us we are still trapped in attachment. If we give and feel proud, the mirror shows us we are still feeding ego. If we give and feel light, free, and joyful, the mirror shows us we are walking closer to truth. So in a way, generosity is not about the money or the time, or the gift itself. It is about training the heart. It is about cleansing the lens through which we see life. A personal reflection. I'll share something personal. There was a time when I gave but secretly expected something in return, even if it was just appreciation. And when I didn't receive it, I felt disappointed. I realized that in those moments, my giving wasn't really pure, it was bargaining. But then, one day, I helped a stranger carry groceries to their car. They never even asked, and they walked away without much more than a quick nod. Yet for some reason, I felt incredibly happy, light, free, and I thought to myself, this is it. This is the feeling of true generosity. It taught me that the reward of giving is not in what comes back to you, it's in what opens within you. An invitation to reflect. So maybe the question we should ask ourselves is this: why do I give? Do I give to be seen? Do I give to be praised? Do I give because I fear bad karma if I don't? Or do I give because my heart naturally overflows? Only one of these leads to peace. Only one of these makes the soul lighter. Closing thought. In the end, generosity is not about objects. It is about intention. It is not about wealth. It is about heart. When we give with pride, the gift dies at the surface. But when we give with purity, the gift multiplies, blessing both the one who receives and the one who offers. The Buddha once said, "The fragrance of flowers goes not against the wind, but the fragrance of virtue spreads in all directions." Pure generosity is that fragrance. It lingers long after the act itself. So here's the simple truth: give quietly, give joyfully, give freely. Because when you do, you will discover something profound. You thought you were giving to others, but in reality, you were giving freedom to yourself. The present benefits of generosity. Have you ever noticed how people who give freely, who share without hesitation, always seem to carry a light around them? There's something about generosity that makes a person glow, not in a superficial way, but in a way that others can feel. It's as if kindness radiates warmth, and people naturally want to be near that warmth. When you give, not because you expect anything back, but simply because it feels right, you begin to notice something subtle. Life feels lighter, relationships flow more easily, and your heart rests more peacefully. In Buddhism, the act of giving, or DNA, is not just a future investment for good karma, it has immediate rewards. These present benefits are often overlooked because people think of generosity only in terms of charity or long-term blessings. But the truth is, generosity changes your inner world right now. It transforms the way you see others, the way you interact with them, and even the way you see yourself. Think for a moment. Have you ever met someone who was stingy, who held onto every little thing with tight fists? You could feel their tension, right? It's almost as if their fear of losing blocks the natural flow of connection. Now, compare that with someone who gives easily, even small things, like a smile, a helping hand, or a kind word. Don't they feel more approachable, more alive? This is the immediate miracle of giving. When we give, we are naturally loved more. People are drawn to generosity because it feels safe. It reminds us that life is not just about taking and competing, but about sharing and supporting one another. Imagine being in a workplace where one colleague always helps others, always shares knowledge, and never hesitates to lend a hand. How would the rest of the team feel about them? Most likely, that person is well respected, even admired. And more importantly, they feel less lonely, because their connections are built on goodwill. The Buddha taught that generosity softens the heart. A heart that clings to possessions, wealth, or even pride becomes heavy. But a heart that gives becomes light and open. And that openness is felt immediately. It doesn't just reduce greed, it reduces fear. Because what is stinginess, really? It is fear. Fear of not having enough, fear of losing, fear of being vulnerable. When you give, you break that fear. You tell yourself, I have enough. I am safe. I am free to share. And this is where the present benefit of giving becomes profound. You don't need to wait for the future, for heaven, or for some distant reward. The peace begins right now. Let me share a story. There was once a woman I met who always carried snacks in her bag. Whenever she encountered someone, whether a colleague, a neighbor, or even a stranger on the street, she would offer a piece, sometimes just a cookie or a small fruit. People often asked her, "Why do you always do that?" And she would laugh, saying, "Because it makes me happy to see someone's eyes light up." What was striking wasn't the food she gave, it was her spirit. She became the kind of person people wanted to be around. She wasn't rich, but her life was abundant, because her relationships were full of trust and warmth. That's the magic of generosity. It nourishes connection. When you are generous, people trust you more. They feel safe with you, and safety is the foundation of love. It doesn't mean you have to give away money or possessions constantly. Generosity can be as simple as giving your time, your patience, or your full attention to someone who needs it. In today's world, where everyone is rushing, imagine how powerful it is just to sit with someone and truly listen. That, too, is a gift. And let's look at the inner benefit. Each time you give, even a small thing, your heart learns to loosen its grip. That tight knot of greed and insecurity starts to unwind. The more you practice, the less you feel bound by fear of loss. Isn't it interesting how, when you cling too tightly to something, it seems to weigh you down? But when you let it flow, life feels lighter. There's also a psychological truth here. Modern research in positive psychology shows that acts of kindness immediately increase happiness levels, not just for the receiver, but also for the giver. The brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which reduces stress and increases feelings of trust and connection. That means generosity literally rewires your brain toward joy. So when the Buddha said generosity brings present happiness, it wasn't just spiritual poetry, it aligns with modern science. But perhaps the most important benefit of generosity is freedom. A stingy heart is a trap heart. It is always calculating. If I give this, will I still have enough? If I help this person, will I lose something? Such thoughts create a prison of anxiety. But a generous heart is free. It doesn't worry so much about scarcity, because it lives in the flow of abundance. I remember once, during a retreat, a monk said something that stayed with me. The greatest poverty is not lack of money, but lack of generosity. And the greatest wealth is not abundance of possessions, but abundance of giving. That line struck me deeply, because I realized that in my own life, the moments I felt most alive were not when I was keeping things, but when I was giving them away. Think about it. Have you ever given something that made you feel lighter, happier? Maybe you bought a meal for someone in need, or maybe you just offered words of encouragement to a friend going through a hard time. In that moment, did you feel poorer? Or did you feel richer? Most of us, if we are honest, would say we felt richer. Because in giving, we discover we already have enough. This is the paradox of generosity. The more you give, the more abundant you feel. Not because the world suddenly showers you with gifts, but because your perception shifts. You no longer live from a place of lack. You live from a place of trust. And trust is the root of peace. So the present benefits of giving are not abstract. They are real, tangible, and immediate. You become more loved because people sense your openness. You create better relationships because generosity builds trust. You live more peacefully because fear and stinginess lose their grip on your heart. And perhaps most beautifully, you begin to experience the joy of freedom, not tomorrow, not in the afterlife, but right here, in this very moment. And maybe that's the greatest secret. Generosity is not about losing. It's about discovering the wealth that was already within you. So let me leave you with a question. The next time you are faced with a choice, to hold on tightly or to let go and give, what would happen if you chose generosity? What would shift in your relationships, in your heart, in your peace of mind? The answer is not something I can give you. It's something you'll have to feel for yourself. But I can promise you this, the moment you give, you'll know. The present benefits of generosity. Have you ever noticed how people who give freely, who share without hesitation, always seem to carry a light around them? There's something about generosity that makes a person glow, not in a superficial way, but in a way that others can feel. It's as if kindness radiates warmth, and people naturally want to be near that warmth. When you give, not because you expect anything back, but simply because it feels right, you begin to notice something subtle. Life feels lighter, relationships flow more easily, and your heart rests more peacefully. In Buddhism, the act of giving, or DNA, is not just a future investment for good karma, it has immediate rewards. These present benefits are often overlooked because people think of generosity only in terms of charity or long-term blessings. But the truth is, generosity changes your inner world right now. It transforms the way you see others, the way you interact with them, and even the way you see yourself. Think for a moment. Have you ever met someone who was stingy, who held onto every little thing with tight fists? You could feel their tension, right? It's almost as if their fear of losing blocks the natural flow of connection. Now, Compare that with someone who gives easily, even small things like a smile, a helping hand, or a kind word. Don't they feel more approachable, more alive? This is the immediate miracle of giving. When we give, we are naturally loved more. People are drawn to generosity because it feels safe. It reminds us that life is not just about taking and competing, but about sharing and supporting one another. Imagine being in a workplace where one colleague always helps others, always shares knowledge, and never hesitates to lend a hand. How would the rest of the team feel about them? Most likely, that person is well respected, even admired. And more importantly, they feel less lonely, because their connections are built on goodwill. The Buddha taught that generosity softens the heart. A heart that clings to possessions, wealth, or even pride becomes heavy. But a heart that gives becomes light and open. And that openness is felt immediately. It doesn't just reduce greed, it reduces fear. Because what is stinginess, really? It is fear. Fear of not having enough, fear of losing, fear of being vulnerable. When you give, you break that fear. You tell yourself, I have enough. I am safe. I am free to share. And this is where the present benefit of giving becomes profound. You don't need to wait for the future, for heaven, or for some distant reward. The peace begins right now. Let me share a story. There was once a woman I met who always carried snacks in her bag. Whenever she encountered someone, whether a colleague, a neighbor, or even a stranger on the street, she would offer a piece, sometimes just a cookie or a small fruit. People often asked her, "Why do you always do that?" And she would laugh, saying, "Because it makes me happy to see someone's eyes light up." What was striking wasn't the food she gave, it was her spirit. She became the kind of person people wanted to be around. She wasn't rich, but her life was abundant, because her relationships were full of trust and warmth. That's the magic of generosity. It nourishes connection. When you are generous, people trust you more. They feel safe with you, and safety is the foundation of love. It doesn't mean you have to give away money or possessions constantly. Generosity can be as simple as giving your time, your patience, or your full attention to someone who needs it. In today's world, where everyone is rushing, imagine how powerful it is just to sit with someone and truly listen. That, too, is a gift. And let's look at the inner benefit. Each time you give, even a small thing, your heart learns to loosen its grip. That tight knot of greed and insecurity starts to unwind. The more you practice, the less you feel bound by fear of loss. Isn't it interesting how, when you cling too tightly to something, it seems to weigh you down? But when you let it flow, life feels lighter. There's also a psychological truth here. Modern research in positive psychology shows that acts of kindness immediately increase happiness levels, not just for the receiver, but also for the giver. The brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which reduces stress and increases feelings of trust and connection. That means generosity literally rewires your brain toward joy. So when the Buddha said generosity brings present happiness, it wasn't just spiritual poetry, it aligns with modern science. But perhaps the most important benefit of generosity is freedom. A stingy heart is a trap heart. It is always calculating. If I give this, will I still have enough? If I help this person, will I lose something? Such thoughts create a prison of anxiety. But a generous heart is free. It doesn't worry so much about scarcity because it lives in the flow of abundance. I remember once, during a retreat, a monk said something that stayed with me. The greatest poverty is not lack of money, but lack of generosity. And the greatest wealth is not abundance of possessions, but abundance of giving. That line struck me deeply, because I realized that in my own life, the moments I felt most alive were not when I was keeping things, but when I was giving them away. Think about it. Have you ever given something that made you feel lighter, happier? Maybe you bought a meal for someone in need, or maybe you just offered words of encouragement to a friend going through a hard time. In that moment, did you feel poorer? Or did you feel richer? Most of us, if we are honest, would say we felt richer. Because in giving, we discover we already have enough. This is the paradox of generosity. The more you give, the more abundant you feel. Not because the world suddenly showers you with gifts, but because your perception shifts. You no longer live from a place of lack. You live from a place of trust. And trust is the root of peace. So the present benefits of giving are not abstract. They are real, tangible, and immediate. You become more loved because people sense your openness. You create better relationships because generosity builds trust. You live more peacefully, because fear and stinginess lose their grip on your heart. And perhaps most beautifully, you begin to experience the joy of freedom, not tomorrow, not in the afterlife, but right here, in this very moment. And maybe that's the greatest secret. Generosity is not about losing. It's about discovering the wealth that was already within you. So let me leave you with a question. The next time you are faced with a choice, to hold on tightly or to let go and give, what would happen if you chose generosity? What would shift in your relationships, in your heart, in your peace of mind? The answer is not something I can give you. It's something you'll have to feel for yourself. But I can promise you this, the moment you give, you'll know. Everyday stories of generosity. Sometimes when we hear about generosity or the Buddhist teaching of DNA, we imagine something grand. A philanthropist donating millions, a monk giving up everything, or stories from ancient times when kings gave away entire kingdoms. But what if I told you that generosity is not far away, not unreachable, not something reserved only for saints or the wealthy? In truth, generosity lives right here, in the simplest moments of our daily lives. Think about the people you admire in your own circle. Maybe it's not the richest person you know, but the one who always shows up for others. The friend who remembers your struggles, the colleague who shares their notes when you missed a meeting, the neighbor who checks in when you're sick. These are acts of generosity, and while they may seem small, they shape relationships in powerful ways. Let's take a modern example. Imagine two colleagues working side by side. One is focused only on themselves, finishing their tasks, climbing the ladder, protecting their own time. The other is willing to share, sharing knowledge, helping when someone falls behind, celebrating others' successes as if they were their own. Over time, who do you think wins the trust and respect of the team? Who becomes the kind of person others turn to in moments of need? And who feels less alone in the workplace? It's easy to see. Generosity makes us magnetic. Not in a fake or manipulative way, but in a deeply human way. People naturally love those who give, because generosity creates safety. It tells others, you matter, I see you, I'm willing to share this journey with you. And what's beautiful is that generosity doesn't always mean giving money. In fact, in modern life, some of the most precious gifts are time, attention, and patience. Have you ever noticed how rare it is, in today's world, for someone to truly listen without interrupting, without checking their phone? To sit with you, give you their full presence, and let you feel heard? That is generosity. That is love in action. I once met a man who worked in a busy corporate office. By all measures, he was average. He wasn't the highest earner, not the most skilled, not in leadership. But everyone loved him. Why? Because he had a habit. Whenever he made coffee in the break room, he would make an extra cup and offer it to someone else. He would notice when someone was tired, and he'd say, "Hey, I'll cover this part for you, take a short break." Over the years, this small habit made him one of the most respected people in the office. His colleagues trusted him. They invited him into their lives. And when challenges came, like layoffs and restructuring, he was the one people rallied around, the one who always found support. That's generosity in everyday life. So often we underestimate the ripple effect of simple giving. We think it has to be big to matter. But small kindness, practiced consistently, becomes a reputation. And that reputation becomes a legacy. Imagine being remembered as the person who always shared, who always made others feel lighter. Isn't that more valuable than being remembered only for your titles or possessions? Let me ask you something. When was the last time you experienced generosity in a small, unexpected way? Maybe a stranger held the door for you when your hands were full. Maybe a coworker covered for you without asking for anything back. Maybe a friend simply called to ask how you were doing. How did it feel? Did it make your day a little brighter? That's the everyday power of generosity. And here's another truth. Generosity is contagious. When someone gives to you, it stirs something inside. You feel grateful, and that gratitude often sparks the desire to pass it forward. A smile leads to another smile. A helping hand inspires another helping hand. In this way, one act of kindness can ripple across an entire community. I'll share a story from my own experience. Years ago, I was struggling with a heavy workload and feeling completely overwhelmed. One evening, a colleague stayed late, not because they had to, but because they saw how stressed I was. They quietly sat beside me, helped me finish the tasks, and then walked me out with a simple, "Don't worry, tomorrow will be easier." That moment stuck with me. Later, when I saw another coworker going through a hard time, I remembered that kindness, and I stayed late for them. Without realizing it, I had become part of the same cycle. That's the beauty of generosity. It multiplies. Buddhism often teaches generosity as a spiritual practice, but you don't have to be a monk in a monastery to live it. You can live it in traffic, by letting someone merge ahead instead of cutting them off. You can live it in your family, by giving your loved ones patience instead of irritation. You can live it in your community, by sharing a meal with someone who's going through a tough time. And when you start to see generosity in this everyday way, it no longer feels distant or intimidating. It becomes something alive, practical, and accessible to everyone. Because truly, who among us cannot smile, cannot listen, cannot share a little of what we have? There's a phrase I once heard: generosity is the perfume of the heart. The more you give, the more fragrance you leave behind. And I believe that's true. The fragrance of generosity is what makes people remember you with warmth. It's what makes life meaningful, beyond the endless cycle of working and consuming. So, here's an invitation. The next time you go about your day, look for one small way to give. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be as simple as letting someone go ahead of you in line, offering words of encouragement, or checking in on a friend. See how it feels. Notice how your heart reacts. Because the truth is, generosity is not far away. It's not in ancient scriptures or far-off temples. It's in the office, in the grocery store, in your kitchen, on the street corner. It's in the everyday rhythm of life, waiting for you to recognize it, to practice it, and to let it flow. And when you do, you'll find that the world around you begins to change, not because the world itself suddenly becomes softer, but because your own heart does. And a soft heart makes everything more beautiful. So, the question I'll leave you with is this: what story of generosity will you write with your life today? Closing message plus teaser. As we've traveled together through these reflections on generosity, I want you to pause for a moment and take a deep breath. Think back to all the stories, all the images, all the little examples we've explored. From the simple smile offered to a stranger, to the unseen ripple of kindness in an office, to the deep truth that every act of giving enriches not only others but ourselves. And here, my friend, is the essence of it all. Generosity is the key that opens the invisible door to joy, to trust, to connection, and to blessings that extend far beyond what we can see. When you give, you are not losing. You are not becoming smaller. You are not emptying yourself into nothingness. No, the truth is the opposite. Every time you give, you are investing in the wealth of your own heart. You are watering the soil of your soul. You are shaping a future where peace and support will find their way back to you, often in ways you could never predict. We live in a world that tells us to hold tightly, to protect what is ours, to accumulate more. But let me ask you this: how many people have you met who own everything, but still feel hollow inside? And how many have you met who give freely, and somehow their life feels abundant, even if they don't have much? The Buddha once taught that generosity is the seed of all spiritual progress. It is where everything begins. Why? Because when you let go of greed, fear, and grasping, your heart opens. And when your heart opens, wisdom, compassion, and peace can flow in. Generosity is not just a good deed, it's a practice of freedom. Freedom from the prison of me and mine. Freedom from the endless hunger of never feeling like we have enough. And freedom to live with a lightness that money alone could never buy. So the message I want you to carry with you today is this: generosity is the key that unlocks the treasure chest of blessings. When we give, we are not losing. We are, in fact, enriching the deepest part of ourselves. But now, let me challenge you with something deeper. Because life is never as simple as one clear path. Giving is powerful, yes, but what happens if generosity is misguided? What if, instead of helping, our giving causes harm? What if we give in ways that feed dependency, encourage harmful habits, or even inflate our own ego? Have you ever wondered, can generosity, when done without wisdom, actually create negative karma? Can a well-meant gift lead to unseen harm? These are not easy questions, and yet they are important, because generosity, like every powerful tool, must be used with care. So in our next video, we'll step into that exploration together. We'll ask, what does it mean to give wisely? How can we make sure our generosity truly nourishes, instead of unintentionally hurting? And what are the subtle dangers of giving for the wrong reasons? If today's reflection has reminded you of the beauty of giving, then the next one will challenge you to deepen it, to see generosity not only as kindness, but as wisdom in action. So remember this: the act of giving is never just about the gift. It's about the intention, the heart, the awareness behind it. And that's where we are heading next. Until then, I invite you to live generously today. Not tomorrow, not someday, but today. Offer a smile, a kind word, a helping hand. And as you do, know that every small act is a thread, weaving a fabric of blessing that will one day cover you in warmth. Because in the end, the richest life is not the one filled with possessions, it is the one overflowing with generosity. So let's keep walking this path together. And in our next step, we'll ask the question that every giver must face: what happens when giving goes wrong? Stay tuned.